But I do intros. So I work for Anvaya Solutions. They're the sponsor for this talk. We had two presentations, one today, one yesterday. Anvaya Solutions, we're a premier cybersecurity firm, started in 2007, local here in Folsom, California. Customers are state agencies, utilities, financial sector, and we provide in-depth security services, e-discovery, forensics, and on the other side, risk assessments, risk management, policies. A little bit about myself. I'm Vice President for Cybersecurity Services. Have been in security field. Can you hear me? In the back? OK. I've been in the security field for 18 plus years, long before I tell people. We were in cybersecurity before it was cool to say I work in cybersecurity. Those days, people call me paranoid. Nobody does anymore. The broad spectrum experience in IT, in information security, software development, validation, system administration, network management, platform security, and so on. Multiple domains in InfoSec. You have my contact information. If you need cards, you can talk to me later. You can get them from there. So let's set some expectations. Grab your lunch, water, coffee. We're going to be here for 6 hours. It's not an easy topic. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. So truthfully, this is a very big topic. It takes at least 6 hours to go through in detail what I'm trying to cover in 35 minutes. So there's many reference documents. What I did is look through many of them, and lots of coffee reading them, rereading those documents, because by the time I go to the half of the document, I forgot what I read in the first 200 pages. So that's why I'm here, trying to help you guys distill all those documents into something, a simple process. Agenda, we talk about risk management, the different standards and guidelines, focus on risk assessment, which is a big part of risk management, how to conduct one and how to communicate the risk. Because at the end of the day, we identify the risk, and if we cannot present that to the executives and finance to get funding, what's the point in doing all the work? So the goal is for US security professionals to conduct the risk assessment, then apply it to next level of management. They can apply it to finance, and then say, now the ball's in your court. If you don't provide me the money, something happens, somebody calls, I have to refer them to you. Most of the time, you get funding at that point. Risk management, it's a process. It's a very disciplined process that you need to follow. If you look at SAM 5305, this is what they say. Risk management is the process of taking actions to avoid or reduce risk to acceptable levels. I like DHS. They go a little bit further. They say very similar things. You identify, analyze, and communicate your risk. And you want to, and also communicate to the management. Do you want to avoid, transfer, control to that an acceptable level? You cannot mitigate everything, right? So that's why we call it prioritization. And then you see considering associated costs and benefits of the action taken. We believe in practical security, protect to enable, right? So that's, I really like what DHS says. Let's now talk about the process for managing the risk. It's at a very high level, it's 3 steps. Asset identification and categorization. You do your risk assessment, and you disposition the risk. Accept, avoid, transfer, control. Then you, once you've done those 3, your systems are in production, you want to monitor the risk, because the risk changes over time. A vulnerability that was not known today, something can come up tonight. Some security researcher found information published and gives a good people, gives a forewarning to the software vendors. We give them 90 days. Sometimes we go, if it's big, give them 6 months or 9 months. and they can contact their customers for the mitigation, depending on the risk. And then how often do you conduct a risk management? What is your activity? Is it a once and done? No, it is a continuous process. It depends on when you do your asset identification and categorization. That's when you're also thinking, how often do I need to do this? Do I need to do it once every 2 years, once every 6 months? It depends on your category. Category of the information system, the application, your data. It's multiple factors. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then it applies to your existing facilities, physical and logical. Applies to new systems and applications that you're developing. We try to encourage all our customers to think of security as they're building the application, as they're developing the requirements. Security should be a critical requirement for your application or system that you're developing. And then there could be ODAs. I just talked about it. Vulnerabilities can be found anytime, right? So now let's look at the standards and guides. There's many standards and guides. It's when you look at it, you got standards from NIST, from ISO IEC, from ISACA, you got COBIT, you got FIPS. So I mean, I just named 4 organizations, and each one has their own standards and guidelines. They all interrelate, but the specific documents you read, that way you get a coverage in breadth. Very similar to what we said, defense in depth and defense in breadth. It's a breadth of coverage if you read all of these. But this is how you feel. When you look at all those, you're totally overwhelmed. Poor Milt, he's asking for a stapler. He doesn't want to read any documents. So out of all the list I said, I presented on the other slide, these are the ones you want to focus on. Presentation is going to be posted, so if you want, you can have this information later. So in the next 20 minutes, we'll talk about what we're going to do, how to follow the risk management process. I didn't make this up. I just color-coded it so it's a little bit more attractive. The source is down there. You can go to the link. You can get one yourself. It's also on the handouts that you have, so you should have it. The 6 steps in the framework are you categorize, identify and categorize your systems. Then you select the controls, the security controls. You evaluate existing controls, and you also select new controls. These controls could be detective, preventive, protective, right? So those are the categories of controls, and you want to see how each one can help enhance your security posture. Then you implement the security controls. You look at a baseline, and then you customize it to your environment. All the tools you buy, they provide you baseline security controls. Then you customize it. Of course, always change the default password. I've seen so many cases where they don't. You customize your controls. Then before you deploy them, assess them in a sandbox. Are all the controls doing what I expect them to do? Conduct a vulnerability assessment. See how the controls are catching the anomalous activity. Then you push the controls to production, and you authorize information systems for production also. The next comes monitor. Remember I said it's not a once and done process. You're always monitoring your environment, always monitoring, am I good enough? Never be complacent. You're never going to be good enough, right? We all know in security, there's these guys, and security researchers, and then the black hats knew too many for us to be complacent. So you're always monitoring your controls, monitoring your application, reviewing your risk assessment at a certain frequency. So let's break that 6-step process into flowchart. I'm a flowchart guy. I go step 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm always thinking like that. So your step 1 is asset identification and categorization. Once you know what your assets are, in the handouts you have FIPS. There's a template from FIPS 199 that actually shows how you can categorize it. Identify your assets. Now you do a vulnerability assessment. You look at your most critical assets. You want to go from there. If I don't have this service, what will happen to my organization? Will we still be operational? What is the impact, right? So you conduct risk assessment on those applications. You look at HR, you look at we talked about SCADA yesterday. Look at your HR controls. That's plant controls. It's HR, finance, e-commerce, help desk, so on. So during the risk assessment, what you do is you conduct a vulnerability assessment, you identify the risks. You conduct a risk analysis. That's what I'm going to show an equation. It's you look at the likelihood, the impact, and you come up with a prioritization during the risk analysis. There you go, risk prioritization. You take the results from your risk assessment and you develop a mitigation plan. Before you go to the management, you say, hey, this is what it takes to mitigate these risks that we identified in this priority order. Communicate to your management, communicate to your finance. Hopefully you'll get funding. Then you can implement your risk and the mitigation plan. I say implement risk mitigation plan. If you can't do it, have a variance. And never have a variance that is 9 months long. Unless, of course, it's so complex that you can't fix it. It takes you 9 months to fix it. I think the semantic gentleman is talking about have somebody in a retainer that you can call to have them come and do the mitigation. Otherwise, you go through the procurement process, takes time, right? And as a security professional, I don't like the word mitigation. I like to resolve it. But practically, you mitigate it, then you resolve it. Best case scenario, you can resolve it right away. Worst case scenario, variance, mitigation, resolution. That's what we like to see. Then you monitor the risk. You have your logs, you're getting threat intelligence from the industry, seeing what's happening. Do the vulnerabilities and the threats apply to you? You monitor the risk. You go back to your risk assessment again. Am I good enough? Never good enough, right? Am I good enough today? That's what you're looking at. Okay. Risk management. First thing you do, understand your risk tolerance. If you're a finance company, what information are you trying to protect? Are you protecting PI? Are you protecting account information, bank information, health information, and so on? What is the risk tolerance of your organization in case that gets compromised? What is the impact to the individuals? That's the bottom line, right? Privacy, health information, individual information, safety. What is the impact that if that information gets, that system, that application gets compromised? What's the risk tolerance? What do you do? So again, if somebody comes and tells you, hey, we have this tool implemented, we'll help you configure it, you'll be 100% secure. Don't believe it. If you do, then we have a bridge that we can sell you. I'll give you a big discount on that too. So we have a scale we tell our customers, understand your risk tolerance. There's a scale. Completely risk averse, Fort Knox, or flying in the seat of your pants, jumping off a cliff. Organizations are somewhere in the middle, like the blue box there. Some organizations in finance, they're more risk averse. Banking, risk averse, so they tend to go to the left side. So we talked about risk tolerance. Now let's look at the process. Again, it's identify, analyze, prioritize, and communicate. That's the equation I was talking about. I'm a geek. Sorry, I like calculus. But risk is always a function of your threat, the likelihood that the threat can be exploited, and the impact when that exploit happens. And it's over time. That's where the DT is. So it's integral over time. It's continuous. That's why we show it as integral. And then communicate your risk to your management. So let's talk about the individual components, right? Identify. What do you do? Step one, characterize the system. What is the system being used for? What data is in the system? What if the system goes down? What if the system gets exploited? You need to think of all those. Don't be complacent. Think of the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, nothing happens. Worst case, something happens in the next hour. Somewhere in between. I mean, that's being paranoid. That's me. What happens in the next hour? I keep thinking that. We keep thinking, OK, bad guys don't follow process. When we conduct assessments, we get documentation. We don't read the documentation. Bad guys don't. Their goal is to break in. They're looking at every single window that's open that you can get in. So when you're characterizing your system, think of that. You know how your system is supposed to work. Now get somebody that's not familiar with the system, tell them to use it. They'll break it. We did that in validation even before I was involved in security software validation. Every single time, developers hated us, but end product was great. So that's basically what you do. When you identify your systems, you identify the vulnerabilities, identify your threats. You can look at NVDB, look at CVSS. NVDB, stands for National Vulnerability Database. CVSS is the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. I think I have that right. Then you have MS ISAC. You get information from there. Put all the threat intelligence together and identify, do these threats apply to me? Do these vulnerabilities apply to me? Just because it's a vulnerability for agency A, organization A, doesn't mean it's a vulnerability for you. You have to process that. You have to analyze that. So here is it's there on your handout. FIPS 199, how do you identify your assets and categorize it? I really like this, very concise. You can look at it, put it in an Excel spreadsheet. You can get your scoring. Next, once you identify, what do? You analyze. We talked about analyzing your controls. We talked about deterrent, detective, protective, and preventive. So those are the 4 categories of controls. Do you have them today? If you don't, what do you need to get, right? And first you analyze your existing controls, the likelihood, if your controls are working, what's the likelihood that exploit can happen, and the impact analysis. If the controls you have are not good enough, go back to step 4 again. Look at more controls that are there in the industry. Talk to your peers. DHS has quite a bit of information too. Talk to them. Get the intelligence from the market. Look at your controls. What else do I need? Have some proof of concept. Check them out. Then you look at your likelihood again, right? So it's almost a circular process. And the impact analysis. If you're just trying to get funding, you're not at the point you already have funding, then you probably don't need to go to the second loop. You're already go to step 4, 5, 6. You've done the impact analysis. Now let's prioritize the risks. Oh, I forgot this slide. This also I got from FIPS 199. This is a really good slide. If you read it, it talks about the triad, security triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And it talks about if confidentiality is compromised, is it low impact, moderate, or high impact? That's where that information goes here in this spreadsheet. Then if your integrity is compromised, integrity of data, integrity of system, what happens? What is the impact? So this is where you're doing your impact analysis. And once you get your impact analysis, you determine your risk using the equation. Then you prioritize your risk because you want to address at least the highs and mediums, maybe lows if you have funding. Sometimes we tell customers anything that's in the low, if you can chain multiple lows and they become a medium or a high. So we need to take that into account as well. And next is, just because the last step is not important, it's not least important, it's very important. It's like my mom says, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's in your presentation. And make sure management understands what you're talking about. Geek speak, no. Present that in management speak. I'm not saying dumb it down. I'm saying present so they understand dollars and cents. Management understands dollars and cents. When you do a risk assessment, this is what you want to develop. You want to develop a risk matrix. You have the highs, mediums, and lows. And for a high, corrective action is required. I mean, there's no exception. There's no option for it. And it needs to be done ASAP. Can you do it tomorrow morning? Well, and like if you make the change and push it out tomorrow morning without testing, it's got its own impact. So as soon as possible, within the week. If it's a medium, corrective actions are needed. It doesn't have to be done right away. But it must be deployed in reasonable time, depending on the application, depending on the impact. Are you allowed downtime? Those are things you want to consider. For the highs, you have to take downtime. Take downtime, fix it. Otherwise, the bad guys, the hackers, terrorists, nation states, they're going to give you downtime whether you like it or not. So it's better you take downtime, do your preventive maintenance, and come back online. Lows, even if it's categorized low, look at them. You can accept the risk and see if you need corrective actions. Like I said, quite often, after we categorize, we look at the lows and say, hey, let's combine these two, and bam, we're in, just because it's a low. So that's what hackers do, right? They're looking at every single attack vector. The low attack vectors, chain them, suddenly it becomes a high attack vector. If it's informational, put it in the documentation. Do you want to do it next release? Whatever. But still monitor every one of these. Just because they didn't fix the lows and the informational priority, that doesn't mean they stay that way forever. What's low today will become high tomorrow. That's why you want to monitor it. Next thing is you want to communicate your key risk indicators to your technical managers and your executive managers. Make sure it's a reasoned assessment. Have credible attack vectors. If it's a perception, have a confidence level. Say, hey, I'm 70% confident it can be done. Given time, I can prove it to you. Or 90%, whatever it is. Present your confidence level. Present the likelihood of occurrence. Now you're talking dollars and cents. What's the technical? So how do you come with that? You look at the technical difficulty, and then you talk about business impact. Don't use FUD. They'll probably buy FUD the first time. They won't believe you next time. Right? You can't cry wolf every day. So this is anything that you want to present to your management. It doesn't have to be in this graph. You can say, hey, we mitigate these risks, and this is a resolution if you give us the funding, the resources to make that happen. There you go. Your goal is to take everything in red and push it down. Orange, yellow, green. If you come to green, awesome. Will it happen every single time, every risk? That's been identified now. But your goal is to come to the lower left corner of that graph as much as you can. That will help your management. They can determine, hey, do I need to spend the money? Here's your manager saying, OK, great, let's fix it. And the finance, I get a chuckle out of this. He said, oh, he has 100K, I'm going to give him 50. He's going to do more with less. So every day, we see it every day. And like I said, security risk is dynamic. What's low today can move to high. I think I spoke fast enough, so we have time. Questions?
How often do you recommend revisiting the entire assessment? How, 6 months, 3 months?
Depends on your system categorization. 3 months is probably too soon for any organization. If you're handling privacy information, good question. You don't want to do the whole process, but if you're making any changes, think of the impact not just on functionality, but what does it do in terms of security, right? Even though this is an old system, security was not built in, but now that you're thinking about security, every change, make sure security is considered. That way you don't have to keep doing it every 3 months. You can do it every 6 months, every year. Depends on what you have and what the risks are. Oh, questions? Incentivized to ask you questions. Here is a cool pen. You got a stylus. I can show you here. It's a stylus. You got screwdrivers, and then a spirit level. So Shobha has the pens. She can hand them out. I'm asking to be heckled. Incentivize you. Yes, sir.
In your diagram where you got to the risk variance portion, what about risk acceptance? And then also, what about some kind of formal risk acceptance document? What I've seen a lot of times is we talk about a project, we see the cost, and they say, well, we can't afford that.
Right.
And then the issues drop with no formal risk acceptance.
So that is variance, right? A variance is, okay, I'm going to accept this risk. When executives are say, you know what, cost too much money, we're going to accept it, we can live with it. It's within our tolerance level. But don't it has to be documented. You ask how often should we revisit it. We tell people to revisit the variance every 3 months. Don't go more than 90 days for a variance. Revisit it. Is there any other way we can do it? Now we have new tools. We acquire new resources. Can we have a mitigation plan, right? That should be formalized, documented, signed off by the decision makers. Hold them responsible. I mean, you identified the risks. They should be responsible saying, because they have the bigger picture. I'm looking at my application, I want to make it secure. I don't care if it costs $1 million, we're going to make it happen. No, I mean, you got other things to do. Organization has other priorities. That's why I like what DHS says is associated cost and benefit. It's a risk-reward decision there.
So, two questions. How do you meld this with a privacy impact assessment? And secondly, on your likelihood, which sometimes seems a little subjective, what are your recommendations on that scoring?
So on the likelihood, we get that often. In the likelihood, we look at how difficult is that exploit, right? I mean, there's some exploits that are really difficult. It takes specialized skills. So you look at the hacker base and say, it's again, that part comes from threat intelligence. And you're looking at your security specialists, InfoSec specialists. Hopefully they're always in tune with what's happening in the industry. They can see how the hackers are morphing, how the attacks are morphing, and they'll get a idea about how difficult it is to exploit. That will tell you the likelihood. It is subjective. It's not, just because I say that risk is going to happen, can I guarantee that's going to happen right now? No. But can I tell you with a high level of confidence saying, I know it's going to happen, it's just a matter of time? There is many, we look at information on the dark web. There's many reams of information out there that gives us an idea of what the attackers do, what the attack vectors are. Just running scan tools won't tell you that. You should be able to look at the applications, understand the architecture, and say, you know what, the scanner didn't catch it, but I know I can get in. Hopefully I answered the question. It is a subjective, very subjective. Risk assessment is very subjective. That's where your presentation to, where is it? Right there. Likelihood of occurrence, technical difficulty, and business impact. You put those three together.
So, Sri, I have a question. So, one of Deb's questions was about linking it or melding it with a privacy impact assessment. Have you done that? Have you attempted to do that, or would you have recommendations for how we might do that?
Right there. How do you protect the information? Can the integrity be maintained and the confidentiality maintained so privacy information is not exposed? Not all applications have privacy implications. They have safety implications. So if you're looking at application that handles PI, that should be considered. And we look at when we conduct an assessment, we look at if I can get this information, where can I jump from there? We look at what is out in the industry, right? There is what we call many sources of truth, but are they safe, right? From there, you jump into if I can exploit that, then what can I do? Then what privacy information gets impacted? And if let's say driver's license, right? If a driver's license is compromised, what can be done? Now you're talking privacy, you're talking about safety. Just because it's a driver's license number and street address, is that it? Are they going to open a bank account? We're also concerned with the safety. There's a lot of people that target certain segments. So you should be thinking about their safety also. Privacy and safety go together. Hopefully I answered that.
Yeah, so it's not a full-blown PIA. It's not linking full-blown with the PIA. It's just a matter of how you categorize your system.
Correct.
And if your system contains personally identifiable information and you categorize it as moderate, here's what you should do.
Exactly.
Okay.
Moderate, high, medium, yeah. I think there's a question here first. Go ahead.
If I can just provide a little bit more input on that. So you obviously have to look at the risk tolerance of your organization. If they're really skittish or there's a lot of regulatory oversight that they can hold you accountable to a strong degree, then you're going to have a higher placement on the classification of your systems depending upon the data that's in there. But that PIA and the risk analysis should probably include a whole wide range of stakeholders in there, not just the technical people, but the business people, your
Definitely.
customers, because you have to get that input. I mean, you're sort of speaking to just the technical aspects of it, but there's a lot of non-technical risk associated with it, including internal, right? So you may have insider threats who may have a benefit that they get by, executing a command that gives them a whole printout of stuff that they can walk out the building with, or they can see it with their camera and take a picture of it. So those are all risks, right? And they're not managed by NIST controls per se, because those are more technical. But those should be all included as part of your risk analysis and your privacy impact analysis as well. What's the impact if that data gets loose? That's mirrored by what your risk tolerance is, right? If
Exactly.
anything, then there's very little risk tolerance in your controls and your procedures and everything like that. Those are all going to be reflective of the amount of risk that you.
That should all be considered. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you. That should all be considered when you're presenting your risk to management, when you're going for funding for resources to get help. We call that brand impact, regulatory impact. For a long time, we call regulations are threats to our business. They are, but if we didn't have the regulations, 90% of the businesses would not even think about security. All information would be wide open, right? So I'm changing my mindset, saying, yeah, regulations are good, because it's forcing a lot of people to think about it. And then brand image, customer consciousness, that's important too. You want to include that in your risk assessment. That's all that goes under business impact. That's your stakeholders, business stakeholders, technical stakeholders, business partners, upstream and downstream. You want to consider all of that. That's your business impact. Tom. Okay. Go ahead. And there's a question. Actually, he was, yeah.
It's a similar question, but I think the reason why I have the question is because I've been in several organizations where it seems like they're the same names, they're different names for the same thing, or that all of these things are somehow synonymous, and that there's not really a relationship between them. So when we talk about privacy impact analysis, or we talk about vulnerability assessments, or we talk about risk assessments, or we even talk about internal audits, it seems like we're all talking about the same thing. Should there be a relationship between those things that help the organization to strengthen its security, or are they all the same thing and they're sort of synonymous?
They're not the same thing. There is overlap between them. For example, let's talk internal audit. You go through SANS 20, critical security controls, the 20 controls. You're using a checklist. Do you have an IDS? Check. IPS? Check. But nowhere does it say, I've seen many audit firms, that's all they do. But if you dive deep into the SANS 20, it actually says, have you changed the default password? Have you configured, have you tailored it? So you just finish your audit, you passed, but you can conduct a vulnerability assessment. Suddenly, what will happen? We passed the audit, why are we not secure, right? So they're not the same, but there's overlap. Same thing with PIA. It's not the same thing as thinking about safety, plant safety, employee safety. And then there is privacy information, right? Here.
Do you have a list that shows the risk assessment that shows in priority? And then did you have your organization, have any data assessment that, okay, this is the top priority risk and the list, this is the second one, and then give us the percentage, how important each of these items is when we are configuring, for example, for our risk assessment, we go through that list and make sure that we match everything.
Yeah.
Is there any analysis has
So-
been done having the data that that's why we are putting this together?
That's when you develop your risk assessment, your prioritization, the impact analysis, risk assessment, vulnerability assessment, likelihood, impact analysis leads to a priority. That is going to tell you, and that's going to help you prioritize it. Going back to Deborah's asking, do you have a quantifiable number? That's hard to provide. But can we give it, say, confidence level of, 90%, I'm pretty confident 90% I can get in? We can, if you ask for specific things saying, no, you got to tell me what the actual quantifiable number is. It's a little bit fuzzy there.
I understand it is possible, but if you have kind of a list that show you, okay, these are so far based on the data that you are gathering, for example, these are so far the highest part of. Therefore, when you are configuring your system, make sure that you take care of these.
Oh yeah, we brought the information to our customers. And I say it's not perfectly quantifiable. We have an equation we use to actually put that in the critical highs, lows, critical high, medium, low, and info. They fall out that way. Once you finish doing a calculation, and we look at multiple things. We look at CVS score, Microsoft scoring system, then DHS scoring system. We apply those. That will give you the numbers. And that still is subjective. That's why I said it's subjective, but still it's better than just saying, I know it is critical.
It's much better than having none.
Right. So in our spreadsheet, we have those numbers. We say, hey, your CVS score is 5,000. God, fix it now. Yeah. Right? I mean, there is instances where we saw CVS score in the thousands. That needs to be fixed in the next hour. Stuff like that.
And do you have that list that you can, for example, email to the people that you are seeing?
I cannot, because the information that we have is specific to each customer, and we don't want to share anything. We have examples that we can share, but not specific. I would never give that list out. And I won't have it after a certain time when we're done, because it's proprietary to the customer, and I don't want to be responsible if I get hacked, right? So I don't want to be holding the data myself. Tom.
Yeah, so this is just quickly sharing experience. We have the need, I call it risk management light or risk assessment light, where we need to assess risk and make a decision quite quickly. And generally in these cases, there's no funding impact. So the classic example would be there's a new vulnerability, there's a patch. Do we need to patch today? Is the risk high enough, or can I wait till the next patching cycle? So what we tried to go through a more laborious process, and we ended up never being able to decide anything.
So if you guys need more information, people leaving the room, you have my contact information. It'll be there on the slides. Send me an email or call me. We can talk more. Sorry, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, anyway, I'm done. So this is that we've developed kind of a condensed risk assessment process where we can make a decision within an hour with a small team of people of whether we need to take action today or next week or next month. And it's been really helpful to us.
Can you have a booth here?
Yeah, you can stop by the booth and you can talk to him more. Thanks. Anything else? Oh, she didn't get a pen. You had a question. Who had a question this side? Sorry. Okay.
Is the presentation going to be available like the
It's going to be available online.
They all are.
Yeah.
Are they? Oh,
Yeah, we're going to post it online.
oh, they are, okay.
Yeah, on the site where the sponsor.
Well, I know
No, I don't know if they're on now, but they said they will.
I think.
in a couple of weeks we'll have it.
Yeah,
Oh,
it
okay.
takes a little while.
Not that patient.
You want to come? You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. You can contact me. I can. Here's my card. Wow, that's so blurry. Yeah, take my card and contact me. I can send you an email with the presentation.